Say, would you believe a man that smokes a pipe with his eye?
Not.
Live and learn, my boy. Watch.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at infamous scoundrels who managed to utterly bamboozle society with their clever cons.
The truth is, I knew it was you. Now, maybe I didn't get the cuffs on you, but I knew.
Oh, people only know what you tell them, Carl.
Number 10. Mary Carleton, German princess. In 1663, London was enthralled by German princess von Valois, a supposedly orphan noble fleeing an unwanted suitor. In truth, she was born Mary Motors of Canterbury, England. Her early life was unremarkable. She married a shoemaker named Thomas, lost 2 children in infancy, left her husband, and wed another Thomas, a surgeon. This led to arrest for bigamy, and she fled to Cologne. There, she rebranded herself before returning to England, charming high society with fabricated tales. She married another surgeon, John Carleton, but her deception unraveled when an anonymous letter exposed her. Tried for fraud, she was acquitted and turned her notoriety into brief fame, even starring as herself on stage. Her cons continued until 1673 when she was executed for escaping penal transportation. Number 9. Han van Meegeren's fake Vermeers.
You mentioned the name Han van Meegeren in Holland, and the reference will probably be met with a little wink, a little smile. Oh yeah, Mr. April Fool, the man who fooled the art establishment, the man who fooled the Nazis. He's still seen as a kind of hero.
In the 1930s and 1940s, Dutch painter Han van Meegeren pulled off one of history's greatest art cons. Frustrated by critics, he developed secret aging techniques. With them, he forged Vermeer paintings so convincingly that experts declared them masterpieces. Van Meegeren sold his best-known forgery, The Supper at Emmaus, for a fortune.
This way I discovered how to replicate the hardness of 17th century paint.
During World War II, he duped high-ranking Nazis, including Hermann Göring, into buying his fakes. This act made van Meegeren an accidental folk hero. His forgeries helped to protect real Dutch art from Nazi clutches. After the war, he was arrested for selling national treasures to the enemy and forced to reveal his deception to avoid execution. Convicted of forgery, he died before serving his 1-year sentence.
I picked one of the 5 greatest artists who ever lived. I was looking for the grandest succès d'estime that a forger could possibly achieve, and Vermeer seemed like a suitably big name for the job.
Number 8. Calamity Jane's colorful biography.
I think there's a certain amount of self-delusion. Calamity Jane must have been the kind of person who wanted so desperately to live the life that she invented for herself.
Calamity Jane, born Martha Jane Canary in 1852, was a frontierswoman whose life as we know it is an inextricable blend of fact and fiction. She often spun tales of her adventures, many of which were self-aggrandizing fabrications. In her 1896 autobiography, she claimed to have served as a scout for the military and to have performed daring rescues.
Now you sit down and listen. You're a fake, Clam. You dress, talk, ride, and shoot like a man, but you think like a female. A green-eyed, snarling, spitting female.
Historians have since found these stories to be exaggerated at best and completely unsubstantiated at worst. Her reputation for charity, such as nursing smallpox victims in Deadwood, has also been questioned. This mix of truth and tall tales resulted in a larger-than-life folk hero in the eyes of the public. Her dime novels and Wild West shows forever enshrined her legend into the American West.
The final irony is that when she died on August 1st, 1903, she was buried with a gravestone that says August 2nd, because that was the anniversary of Wild Bill Hickok's death. So, what's real and what's not, it's very difficult to say.
Number 7. Sergei Nilis's pseudo-history. In the early 20th century, Russian religious writer Sergei Nilis played a pivotal role in propagating one of history's most infamous forgeries. The fictitious Protocols of the Elders of Zion first appeared in 1903 in a series of Russian newspapers. This fabricated document falsely claimed to reveal a Jewish plot for global domination. 2 years later, Nilis included the full text in his book, The Great Within the Small and Antichrist. He presented the made-up work as empirical proof of a looming Jewish threat. Despite being debunked as a hoax, the protocols fueled anti-Semitic sentiments worldwide, contributing to widespread Jewish persecution. Nilis's endorsement lent the forgery an air of legitimacy, amplifying its reach and impact. Number 6. Dr. Sebi's popular herbalism.
I just grew up, and at 14, I made a statement that I was going to do something to help humanity. But when I made that statement, I also knew that I was going to come up against the established or prevailing philosophy of life. That I knew at 14 years of age.
These days, you can't even open your email without getting advertisements for various health supplements. We forget that not too long ago, that was a trend that in part was popularized by a self-proclaimed herbalist from Honduras. Alfredo Bowman, better known as Dr. Sebi, rose to prominence in the 1980s and 1990s. Without medical training or evidence, Sebi claimed to cure diseases like AIDS and cancer. He pushed a discredited plant-based alkaline diet combined with a special blend of herbal remedies.
Curing AIDS is easy. Curing sickle cell is like play for me. Diabetes, we cure 10 a month. Yet, there aren't any centers in Germany that is beset with diabetes. There aren't centers in the United States that cure diabetes. We cure diabetes.
In 1987, he faced legal challenges in New York for practicing medicine without a license. He was acquitted when the state couldn't prove he'd provided medical diagnoses. Later, he was sued for fraud and prohibited from making therapeutic claims about his supplements.
Whenever you make a statement that goes against the grain, you better be prepared. You better be prepared.
Number 5, Frank Abagnale, Forge Master.
On one particular occasion, I impersonated a prison inspector and walked out the front door of the institute. But I eventually served my time.
You did serve your time?
Did serve my time.
There must be a place for you in show business.
Frank Abagnale Jr. is one of history's most infamous con men. In the 1960s, he allegedly posed as a Pan Am pilot, doctor, and lawyer, forging millions in bad checks before getting caught. His exploits inspired the film Catch Me If You Can, reinforcing his legend as a reformed genius who now helps the government stop fraudsters.
How did you do it, Frank? How did you cheat on the bar exam in Louisiana?
I didn't cheat. I studied for 2 weeks and I passed.
But here's the real con. Much of his backstory is wildly exaggerated. Records show he spent most of his criminal career in prison. The FBI has denied he ever worked closely with them. His most famous cons, like impersonating a lawyer, were likely fabrications. Abagnale duped banks, then duped the public into believing he was the greatest con man ever. In reality, his biggest grift was selling his own myth.
I truly believe I was able to accomplish all those things because I was just a teenage boy. I had no really conscience. I had really no fear of being caught.
Number 4, Charles Dawson's missing link.
Here it is. Is it the face of a fanatic who would mislead his colleagues so cunningly for so long? Or is it the face of an enthusiastic amateur who was hoaxed and misled by some ill-wisher?
Charles Dawson pulled off one of the greatest scientific hoaxes of all time. In 1912, Dawson supposedly unearthed a 500,000-year-old skull in Piltdown, England. With a large cranium and a primitive jaw, Piltdown Man fit neatly into the early 20th century ideas about human evolution. Dawson claimed that the skull belonged to the missing link on the evolutionary journey from apes to humans. For 40 years, the Piltdown Man was central to our understanding of evolution. Then, in 1953, advanced dating techniques revealed the skull was a fraud.
Although Dawson's reputation in his lifetime was untarnished, once the forgery was revealed, his name began to crop up as a prime suspect.
It had been cobbled together from a medieval human skull and an orangutan's jaw, then stained to look ancient. The perpetrator was almost certainly Dawson himself, a serial forger who'd planted fake fossils for years.
Whether he put them there, whether they were planted there for him to find, it is curious that they were found on 2 of his visits.
Number 3, Elizabeth Holmes.
What I know is that I've put the best people in place to be able to investigate every aspect of this and ensure that we meet the quality standards that we hold ourselves to.
Elizabeth Holmes founded Theranos in 2003, promising to revolutionize blood testing with just a few drops. With a black turtleneck and a deep voice, she styled herself after Steve Jobs. Holmes wooed an all-star lineup of investors and political heavyweights. People like Rupert Murdoch and the Waltons of Walmart fame invested tens of millions. By 2015, Theranos was valued at $9 billion, despite its technology never actually working.
We launch in Walgreens in 48 hours. That's right. We did it!
Whistleblowers and investigative reports exposed the scam, revealing that patients had been misdiagnosed and investors misled. The empire crumbled. In 2022, Holmes was convicted of fraud and sentenced to over 11 years in prison.
Theranos employees told us they were closely watched and required to sign non-disclosure agreements. All reinforced, they said, by a threatening team of lawyers and private investigators.
Number 2, Robert Ripley, capitalist con man.
He was not a likely person to become a superstar.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's program is one of the most astounding I've ever attempted. believe it or not.
Robert Ripley made a mint convincing the world to believe it or not. Born in 1890, he started as a cartoonist, sketching bizarre facts and feats of human endurance. His syndicated column exploded in popularity, evolving into radio shows, books, and eventually museums filled with oddities. He traveled the world collecting curiosities from shrunken heads to two-headed animals, turning them into entertainment gold.
True to form, Ripley's show was a huge success. America believed in Believe It or Not. So much so that people were happy to sit around a radio and hear the world's tallest man described to them.
By the time of his death in 1949, Ripley had built a global empire of the weird, one unbelievable fact at a time. Ripley claimed every fact he printed was true. Many ultimately proved to be exaggerated, unverifiable, or downright false.
No one looks at things the way you do. You're one of a kind, man.
Thank you for saying so, my friend. And thank you for coming to my world.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Charles Ponzi, the man behind the scheme.
Ponzi saw an opportunity with postal reply coupons that, properly exploited, could result in great wealth.
Bernie Madoff was a New York financier who swindled investors out of nearly $65 billion. For decades, he promised investors steady high returns that never actually existed. His fraud devastated thousands, from everyday retirees to celebrities and charities. But Madoff didn't invent the game, he just perfected it. The scheme's namesake, Charles Ponzi, ran a nearly identical con in the 1920s, using international postal reply coupons as the bait.
As it turned out, Ponzi never purchased any postal reply coupons. But nearly 17,000 investors had plunged more than $10 million into Ponzi's coffers within an 8-month period.
He promised that his investors could double their money in just 3 months. In reality, he was just using new money to pay off old investors. At his peak, Ponzi was raking in nearly $1 million a day. When the fraud unraveled, Ponzi was convicted and deported. He would eventually die penniless and alone.
One young couple had deposited $4,600 with the dream of using the profits to buy their first home. Holding a worthless Ponzi note, the bitter husband remarked, "Guess it's a doghouse for us now."
Did we con you into watching a video that's missing your favorite grifter from history? Let us know in the comments below. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.